That's Ace, the mascot for the Signage police. And that's probably backwards, because that's how Facebook Live videos work when you use the face-facing camera. And good evening, I'm Trevor Barry, your Saanich Council candidate for millennials and everyone who believes in an economically efficient and sustainable future, with open data and all those other things I talked about in my speech yesterday. Very excited because I'm at the corner of Beckwith and Quadra. And even though Quadra along this segment has been cut up 3 times in as many years, I think twice in the last 18 months, and one has to ask themselves as a Saanich taxpayer, why didn't you coordinate your efforts between the 2 projects? Oh, because your capital planning only allowed you to spend so much in a fiscal year because the accounting system we use as our best practice in BC and many, many other jurisdictions means if you don't use it, you lose it. And because we can't carry over a balance because only Vancouver City can do that under their individual charter. Oh, you mean that there's problems with provincial legislation that we should be looking at and fixing so that these perverse incentives to spend too much taxpayers' money, but not all at once, don't creep up? Well, anyway, all that aside, I must say, I've been walking near this corner many times over the last few years, and this used to be no man's land. There was no sidewalk here. It was just road, and then this person's driveway, road, and then like some weeds that went off to this retaining wall here, which is very odd for a major bus stop. So there was a major piece of active transportation infrastructure, multimodal active transport, which includes transit. And so there was a major bus stop here on both sides of the street. And while there is a really nice separated footpath that we'll go check out on the other side, it was just awful. I mean, it was awful. I walked my kids through here. So anyway, I'm going to cross the street here now. There's no one around. So first things first, curbs, sidewalks. This is great. This is still Saanich doing their normal thing, and I'm not too upset about it. Even as an active transportation and mobility geek, while I know it's better to have grade-separated footpaths or sidewalks, what they have on the other side of the street here, at least they've put this curb in the way so things can't... If a car's going to come at me, it may be careening toward me, it may still hit me, but it's going to hit that thing first. And a little bit of momentum is going to be sucked up, and it might even cause a delay in the amount of time it takes to hit me, and I might get out of the way before that happens. No, today is a special day in British Columbia, because today's the day that all the candidates can go get their packages from City Hall, which I did do today. And because today's the day that the nomination period begins, which is also the first segment of the election period. Oh, wait a minute. There's another term in there that's the period that started January 1st that has to do with financing. But what I'm getting at is the off season is over, and while the rosters may not be completely set in stone until a week from now or a week and a half, we're in campaign time for sure. And you know this because what do you see everywhere on your way home from work today that you didn't see there before? Maybe you even saw some really intrepid volunteers this morning posting some on your way to work or school or play. And I want to give a big shout out to all the retirees and other people of the generations above me. I had a really great few conversations with folks yesterday after my campaign launch address that sort of reminded me, Trevor, it's great that you want to draw out the millennial crowd, but we know you, and we know that you're not ageist, so be careful in your rhetoric not to come across as trying to, put the baby boomer generation, out to pasture. And forgive me, friends, that's not what I mean to do, and I don't believe that's what I did, but I'll be more careful about it because we all need to be in this together, all of us. So anyway, so those people going off to play this morning, they tend to get up earlier maybe. Signs. Oh, it's signs season. And I want to let you guys know something. I don't believe in signs. And it's a real easy thing for a candidate who doesn't have a lot of money behind him to say I don't like a form of advertising because I basically can't afford, I got to give something up anyway, so I'll give up signs. Now, I'm not going to give up signs entirely because my signs go on the interwebs. I plan to do most of my advertising, other than the canvassing style materials, via online, via mostly I think Facebook, because that's where most people are. But you know, I've discovered the Signage News. They put a piece out about me today, but I discovered them 2 weeks ago, and I knew they existed before that. Newsprint is also important, so I'll consider that. No, but you know, I might be anti-sign, and there was a great question at this practice all candidates thing for people around the region the other week ago at UVic at Felicitas, and a really smart guy. Oh yeah, there he is right now. I saw him put up his sign about 3 hours ago, maybe 4 hours, whenever I was getting the kids home for bed. A young man that I admire quite a lot. I saw him out here with a helper putting up that sign, and good for you, Ned. And I heard him say last week, well, signs aren't altogether bad because it reminds people that there's an election. It reminds people of the date, especially. Now, Ned's doesn't actually say this, but that might be because it's a different style of sign than I've seen. It's only one of his I've seen so far, where people actually put October 20th on their sign and the word vote or the word elect. This one might have... Well, it doesn't have elect either, but anyway. But anyways, I can't be a candidate that doesn't plan to put up signs and not talk on the first day that signs are being put up around town about the fact that I'm not going to put up signs, and here's why. And so I want to start with what I think is the most obvious thing to say, but it's not actually my first priority reason. So the obvious thing to say, being a climate geek and a green kind of thinker, is it's bad for the environment. Now, there are environmentally friendlier options, but the idea of mass producing a bunch of things that go up in and they go and basically pollute does seem wrong. And so in that respect, I'm willing to hang my hat on that one along with these others, but let's just remember that I don't think that's the most important. So I'm going to mention some others. Some others include the fact that public land, where most of these signs you will see will be located, no one else is ever allowed to put anything else there. There is a rule that says one shall not put signage up on these public lands, with a very few exceptions. So why is it that a special class of people, every 4 years, or depending on the level of government, let's say every year, a certain class of people are all of a sudden allowed to do this? That's just not equitable. That's just kind of silly. Why should politicians get away with doing things that other people can't do? If I'm a small business owner, I can't put my sign up on public land. Then again, and I do love U-Bicycle, but they kind of do that now, don't they? Interesting policy debate for another day. But no one else is allowed to do it. So that's an equity issue for me. It's also, and here's where I'm coming from as the candidate without a machine behind me. It's also an equity concern that impacts barrier to entry for new or relatively underfunded candidates. We're putting a barrier up. I can't afford, let's call it signs. That's the thing I'm going to say no to. So maybe I shouldn't even run. And there's this interesting nuance that I've picked up on, and I'm not going to go ad hominem here, and I won't, and I don't even want to allude to it, other than I'm so transparent I can't help but mention what I just said, which is those who've run in the past, and thank goodness for banning big money in BC, but those who have run in the past, such as last year's by-election, two of whom I openly supported and two others who I really liked. All those signs they bought when there was not as many restrictions on fundraising and spending, they're allowed to reuse those signs this time around and every time subsequent. So there's an inequity there as well. So, and then I guess the last one for me was that signs are just really ugly use of public space. So that's the reasons why I don't like signs on public space. Now about lawn signs. Now, I have put many lawn signs up on my lawn over the last few years since I've owned a lawn. But for those who know me, you know I own a lawn because my dad died. And I was able to purchase a house with a lawn. Now, maybe we would have got a townhouse with a lawn, and maybe we would have moved out to the West Shore. My goodness, that would have been just the worst. But we didn't, and we ended up in Signage, and we do have a lawn, and I have put signs on that lawn. I won't be this year. Sorry, Rebecca. That same sign that I wanted to keep and use again this time around, you can give it to someone else, because I'm not going to put any signs up because I'm going to take a stand on this one. And it's an equity thing again. It's an intergenerational equity problem. It's a housing affordability salient point, which is that my generation, generally speaking, and different segments of populations across all generations, all demographics, there's a biased sample of those who have lawns to put signs on. And so to me, that's the other problem with like lawn signs. It's sort of visual pollution that's promoting a name, not a set of ideas. Yes, it is telling us when the election period is. Yes, it's sort of engaging people in their democracy. I give Ned full points on those arguments. But those who can afford to have lawns are somehow now a bias in who gets elected. And it shouldn't be like that. And I would hear arguments that would say, well, but Trevor, there are people in apartment buildings who put the sign up in their window. And I would say, yeah, that's actually a fair point. However, the bias still exists, right? Those who have lawns, there's less visual distraction because lawns are kind of boring to drive past, and let's admit that's who these things are marketed toward, is people driving. So if I'm going to buy signs, it's going to be Facebook ads, it's going to be promoted tweets, it's going to be, I guess, on those online places like the Signage News, and I'm thinking BC Transit is where I might go, because transit, unfortunately, actually, you know, yeah, it's public space, but come on, we got to pay for this stuff. So having advertising on transit, I don't disagree with that. In fact, I really don't disagree with that. That makes perfect sense. It's a great way of funding infrastructure and operations and capital. So I might find myself on a bus near you, which would go back to the tendency I have, which is to try to reach out to the under 40 crowd, which is proportionately overrepresented in the transit system. That's not a bad thing. That's just the corollary of that is the bad thing, that, you know, people over 40 are underrepresented on the transit system. So that's my rant about signs. So welcome to the next 7 weeks of signs everywhere, British Columbia. And to all my Sanichites out there, a vote for Trevor Barry is a vote for someone who would do something if asked, would raise a motion about removing signs from this period of our life, or at the very least, restricting it to a few specifically, strategically good visual corridor places where we all get to be reminded that there's an election coming up. Maybe signs that are put in these places have to include words like vote and date of election. But signs are just really ugly. So, signing off, Trevor for Signage.